All right. Thank you very much. Welcome to today's webinar. We're going to be focusing on Storyboard 6.2 and, of course, all the great enhancements that were made to it that really make UI design and development, and in particular, when it comes to testing and validation, a whole lot easier. So let's get started. But before we do that, a little bit of general housekeeping here. That if this is your first time using Zoom, we will be having a Q&A period at the end, so feel free at any point to use the Q&A window that you can see on the screen that's located on the bottom of your bar. It kind of maybe goes away when we're in full presentation mode, and it will come back up just when you kind of hover your mouse over it. And you can enter your questions that you have there. Throughout the presentation, whether I am talking or the other guest panelist is talking, we'll take our time or our ability to answer those questions. So you may want to kind of go back and see if any of the questions that maybe you posed or some of the other people that were on this webinar posed have been answered. And of course, at the end of it all, we will definitely kind of, go through any of the ones that we haven't been answered. Because we are broadcasting over the web, definitely, you may run into some audio issues. There is a settings section that you can kind of go in and take a look to see maybe altering your settings for Zoom. You can also try refreshing the window as well. But before we kind of begin, I just want to kind of say thank you for taking time out of your day, and definitely, in these challenging times that we're all facing, there's a lot going on in the world. A lot of unknown factors that you've taken the time to us talk about Storyboard. And like I said, it's Storyboard 6.2, our latest release. So with that being said, let me introduce myself. My name is Scott Snyder. I am part of the marketing team here at Crank Software. I do product marketing for Storyboard. And our other guest panelist that will be joining us partway through is Rodney Dowdall. He is the lead product architect for Storyboard within the R&D group. So he will be the one that's kind of running you through all the great enhancements that Storyboard brings to the table. So, today's agenda, we're going to kind of go over, just a quick intro into who Crank Software is and what Storyboard is, just in case that some of you that are on today's webinar, that this is like maybe the first time that you've heard about us, or maybe you're in that eval stage. So anybody that maybe has been using Storyboard for a while, please bear with me. And then we'll jump right into, what's new in 6.2. And of course, Rodney will kind of take us through a walkthrough, that live look into Storyboard, and then we'll kind of address all the questions that everybody has at the end of today's session. All right, so for those that are new, if you've never heard of Crank Software before this presentation, or maybe you've just recently heard about it, I can guarantee that probably at some point in your life, maybe definitely in your modern life, that you have used a product running a UI that was created using our software, Storyboard. Definitely many different vertical industries, from consumer goods, whether it's things like smart stoves or smart home appliances, thermostats, to medical devices, automotive, and industrial like John Deere. I've all used Storyboard to definitely create the UIs that really drive the screens that they have in their embedded products. So kind of just giving you a kind of quick overview, Crank Software is both a software and a services-based company that is headquartered in Canada. Our leadership team has a very extensive background in embedded graphics and systems with over 20 years of experience in that business. They all started within QNX as embedded engineers working on embedded systems before forming and co-founding Crank Software. We have a large global customer footprint, from Fortune 500 customers to small organizations and have hundreds of millions of devices in the field that are running a Storyboard built UI. Definitely, we offer also our customers globally access to a global distribution partnership network that really provides them both global and local support, as well as we have extensive partnership support for the silicon vendors, as well as the SOM board vendors, to really address the different needs that your project may have. A couple things kind of want to call out. Definitely, there's been a lot of products that were built, and their UIs have actually won awards. One of the ones that you saw on the previous screen was Warwick, as well as the thermostat, the Sensei thermostat from Emerson. Also, we just recently won an award at the Embedded World, this year's 2020 Embedded World, for most innovative software. So something we did in partnership with NXP to really leverage a unique aspect of one of the boards that they built to really make it easier for our customers that maybe have a 2D, 3D kind of UI they're looking to develop, especially in, say, something that is battery driven, that allows you and allows them to leverage 2D and 3D in a more efficient manner that really allows for better battery usage and better battery life or device life running on that battery. Like I said, not only do we build software, which is Storyboard, but we're also a services-based company as well. And so what does that mean? That means that, you know, you may be a large organization, or you may be a small organization that has a vision, but maybe doesn't know where to get started. Maybe you need a prototype built, so that way you can take it back to the investors or whoever it may be to get approval. Well, you know, our team can do that because of the fact that they build Storyboard and they use Storyboard on a regular basis. You know, they can do a variety of things. So whether it's developing that UI prototype to help advance the project, whether it's maybe building the actual UI for the device based upon maybe some UX design feedback that you may have from an external vendor. It could also be maybe, you know, taking the UI that was developed and maybe you're looking for ways to optimize its performance. So, you know, they can do that for you as well, and much, much more. So definitely, you know, if you are, you know, at a point where you're kind of like, well, maybe I don't have the bandwidth, maybe I don't have the ability to bring on new workers to support this project, then definitely take a look at our professional services team because we're here to make sure that we can help you to the best of our abilities and really kind of leverage all that great stuff that's been built in the Storyboard, so that way you can really kind of develop some fantastic UIs. And again, I'll just give one more little shout out. So maybe remember some of those award-winning designs that we're talking about. Well, those were, you know, working in conjunction with the customer and a UX team. We built those UIs for those products. So definitely, again, if you're in that kind of environment that maybe you need assistance in some way, definitely take a look at our Crank Professional Services team to really see what they can do and really kind of help move your project along, because the most important thing when it comes down to it is making sure that we get that product out the door to market quicker and on time, right? So let's jump into, you know, what Storyboard's about. But before we get that, let's talk about, you know, kind of like, you know, why was Storyboard developed? So really when it comes to developing UIs for today's embedded products, things have really become really increasingly more challenging. You know, user expectations have really been elevated. Today's consumers expect that intuitive and modern touch experience, not only for the physical hardware, but for the quality and smooth or the experience that its graphical user interface provides. And that's because on a daily basis, we all have this little device that fits in our pocket that provides us this experience. So the cell phone, the smartphone has really advanced what consumers expect from a device with a screen. They don't care that the hardware that's driving it may be low powered or low memory or resource constrained. All they know is that, hey, I got this touchscreen device that provides me this fantastic, smooth experience, so I expect the same thing from this other device. Based upon that, the user experience has really quickly become a defining part of today's products, with its UI being really one of the main factors that products are being measured on, and what often actually drives the value that consumers see in the product, and of course, their purchasing decisions. Also, integrating evolution in technology doesn't mean only making hardware decisions any longer, but how will they be incorporated into that user face? How will the user face basically take that on and present that to the actual customer? And of course, the biggest one of all is that anytime that we lose time, or we have resources that are wasted, or maybe coding changes that need to be completely revamped or reworked, these all create delays. And these delays create delays in getting the product to market faster, on time, and of course on budget. It goes without saying that given enough time and resources, the ability to develop a product that blows all the competition out of the water is possible, but unfortunately, we are never given enough time or resources when it comes to developing products within a project. So that's why Storyboard was designed. It was really designed to help remove the barriers that are typically associated with UI design and development. So it was really based upon over 2 decades of experience in designing and implementing embedded UI solutions for a broad range of industries. Like I said, the founders of Crank Software, they set out to build a solution that could really help remove the inefficiencies that often frustrated them and actually their developer colleagues when it came to developing UIs for embedded devices. So what they did is they decoupled the front-end UI from the back-end logic. And by decoupling the front-end UI from the back-end logic, the designer and developer are able to work in parallel to build the app. It's like literally they're working on the same application at the same time because of the fact that they are kind of broken up, but they're connected by this rich kind of glue logic that's provided within Storyboard, and Rodney will talk about that in a little great detail. But so therefore, what it does is it makes it possible for projects to get started earlier on the UI. So even though you may not have hardware decisions finalized, or maybe you're not even able to get the hardware now from the vendor or from your suppliers, it doesn't mean that you cannot start the UI. I'll talk about that in a little greater detail in a moment. It also allows you to easily embrace design iterations that naturally occur throughout a project. And of course, it also helps reduce the complexity of developing UI solutions for product in an ever-evolving embedded hardware world, or maybe even product lines that you may have within your organization. So in other words, what Storyboard does is it helps embedded development teams develop UIs for embedded products more efficiently, therefore making it possible to get to market faster. So let me kind of build upon some of these things that I was just talking about. So definitely, when it comes to Storyboard, what I've heard is that it's powerfully simple, yet sophisticated. This is what some of the things that our customers tell us. It really makes it easy for them to really parallel workflows, really enabling them to create UIs quicker and more efficiently. So when it comes to really helping you accelerate development, the UI development, like I said, can begin without even having hardware choices kind of locked down. And it can begin in design tools such as Photoshop or Sketch, tools that designers are used to on a regular basis. And when ready, when they've designed kind of the look, touch, and feel, where the buttons are, what color the buttons are, the fonts, and all that kind of stuff, it can easily be imported into Storyboard. And then those then become the building blocks for that UI. And from there, UIs can be brought to life using Storyboard's integrated animation tool, allowing you to create, edit, and review animations all directly within Storyboard. And so really allowing a rich sense of flow and animations to be built without having to use different applications. Also, when it comes to like embracing iterations, once the UI development begins, designers and developers continue working in Storyboard's parallel workflow environment, really helping remove the pain and struggle that's often associated with iterations that occur. And as we know, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, because when it comes to UI and projects, everybody has an opinion, right? Whether it's the colors, whether it's the size of the buttons, the location of the buttons, the shape of the buttons, whatever it may be. So you know that iterations are going to occur. And the beautiful thing about it is that those changes can be introduced within Storyboard without impacting the progress of the team or causing a complete teardown of code. And so that's great because that really helps streamline, like I said, making it more efficient and helping you get to market faster. So designers can completely modify the UI look, again, going back into maybe Photoshop, and then actually re-importing those design files, those PSD design files, back into Storyboard without having to create an entirely new application or overriding prior development efforts. And even more importantly is that when you guys do that, you're able to remain in control of those iterations through a unique aspect that only Storyboard has, and it's called a graphical compare and merge tool that allows the content to be kind of compared as to this is what was there, this is what's coming in. Do you want all of it to come, or do you want to select which ones you want to actually apply the changes to, really making for a more efficient, organized workflow, and particularly when you have multiple users across a network really developing this UI. And last but not least, UI flexibility. So really Storyboard was created to be platform agnostic. So that way you can easily de-risk your projects by introducing a development framework that easily supports technology and design changes at any point in the development cycle. So whether it's swapping out elements of your technology stack. So for example, you started going down the path using this particular board, maybe it was an MCU from a particular vendor, only to find that maybe a new one that's more powerful and more cost-effective has been introduced. Well, you can easily take that UI and move it over to that new board, so that way your project gets the benefits of a lower bill of material, a lower cost, that allowing it to, and yet still allowing it to get the market on time, as well as scalability. So maybe it's you started developing on an MPU, but then realized, you know what, it's too powerful, an MCU would be good enough that you can easily scale down, or you could easily scale up from an MCU to an MPU, which is fantastic for maybe if you have a product line. So you have a low end and you have a high end. You can easily take that UI, have it applied across, given that consistent look, touch, and feel across your entire brand. So what makes Storyboard different? Well, like I said, Storyboard provides a foundation for a really streamlined UI development for embedded products that meets both UI development needs, business goals, and designer needs. So the decoupling of that front-end UI from that back-end logic with like I said, that well-defined data model in between and events API in between really provides a clean separation between UI development and hardware deployment, really helping UIs to be more resilient to design changes. Also, Storyboard is not a code generation framework. So, we're not creating, code. Well, we are creating code, but we're not making you work and do heavy coding to be able to make the UI do the things that you need to do. And so what does that mean? That means there's a low barrier to entry for you, because now you don't have to worry about always having to have multiple software engineers thrown at a project. You could actually have some designers doing some of the basic UI design and then basically handing it off. Like I said, also because it's not in that heavy C++ world or heavy coding world, we use something called Lua scripting. And the reason why we went Lua scripting, in case you haven't used Lua or heard of Lua before, it's something we used in the gaming industry because it's very powerful, but it's very lightweight. And so it really allows for UIs to be created and generated within that kind of low-end MCU environment more easily. Also, like I mentioned before, is that we have extensive development and testing done to ensure that our Storyboard engine takes advantage of specific board features such as proprietary graphic libraries, 2D or 3D hardware acceleration, and of course, the different memory management functions that they may have. And so what I mean by that is that, again, where you may have to do a lot of coding and compiling to really make sure that it's optimized for that hardware, our R&D team has done that heavy lifting for you. They have basically worked with the vendors, closely with the vendors, getting the specific DSPs, and making sure that we have these things called runtime engines that are specifically built for the different board vendors, and making sure that they're fully optimized for each of the different hardware platforms that I mentioned that we support. So that way that that UI that you create within Storyboard is going to work fantastically with the runtime engine on that board in the most optimized way, without you having to spend countless hours and days and weeks creating that optimized compiled runtime engine for you. So that's some of the things that makes Crank Software and Storyboard a little bit different. So just before I kind of move things over to Rodney here, I just want to this is a quote that we recently got from one of this is a company that does a lot of professional services for the embedded industry, and definitely utilizing things within 6.2, really kind of like, and Rodney, without stealing Rodney's thunder here, really allowed them to gain some valuable insight into the UI development. So one of the changes we've done is within our performance logs, we put this graphical visualization to it, so allowing you to now easily identify maybe different UI elements that could potentially impact the performance of the UI and, of course, the user experience. And so they were thrilled when we did that. And so I just want to kind of touch quickly on that. So with that being said, I'm going to pass things over to Rodney.
So yeah, for Storyboard release 6.2, it's a feature release that we did. And for this feature release, we focused on 5 major features. They were object-oriented Lua support in Designer. We added the ability to round the corners on our rectangles and fills. We also allowed the ability to start and stop performance logging through our Storyboard IO connector. We added in charts to our performance logger so that you could visually see what was going on with your application. And we also added in the ability to connect remotely to a Storyboard application through TCP/IP. And those features kind of break down into the points that you see on the slide now, which is validation made easy with remote communication. So now you don't have to be right next to your hardware in order to actually interact with it, so that you could do testing without being in the same room as the hardware. Smarter development through enhanced insights. So by providing more information about what's going on with your UI, you can make better choices about what you need to do with your UI in order to enhance it. And big impacts for a tiny footprint. The way we used to support rounding rectangles was through our 9-patch images. By allowing you to do them now, by removing the need for the 9-patch images, we are able to save on the cost for the storage and the heat that we associated with those 9-patch images. And so at this point, I'd like to share my screen. So, all right, sorry about that. So through this demo, I'm going to walk you through the complete process of sort of building up your application. For those of you that are familiar with Storyboard, it'll be a bit of a refresher. And for those that are new, you can see some of our other cool features that we have in Designer. I will be highlighting the major features that we have in as I go through. So I'll point those out explicitly. But I just thought it'd be nice to show you sort of a fully working, end-to-end sort of run with Designer and how things go. So to that end, I'm going to start with the PSD import process. And I have this PSD here. And if we take a look at what it looks like in here, this is what has sort of been designed in the PSD file. So when we pull that in to our new application, you can see that we're presented with the exact same content in our GDE file. So we've managed to pull in the designer's ideas right into Storyboard, and now we can start working with that. And one of the first things that I'm going to do is I'm going to start prototyping my functionality for my application. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to record an animation. So this record button up here allows you to record an animation. And when you're recording an animation, what that does is it tracks all the changes that you make to your GDE file, and we build an animation out of those changes. So I'm going to start the recorder. You could drag and drop and it will catch those as well, but just for speed, I'm going to actually do this in the properties view, and I can just type in, that I want to move this up by 72 and I want to expand it by 72 when it's done. You'll notice that the image didn't expand, and that's because I don't have scaling turned on. I'll turn it on in a minute. I don't need to record that, so I'm just going to leave it as is for now. And then I also want to move up the border as well the same way. So I'm going to subtract that and add this. And again, the border image is going to have to be expanded, but I will do that in a minute after I stop recording. And finally, the card back, because I need to reveal it, I'm just going to drop it up by the size of the card back. And there we have a nice picture of the cat. So I've recorded my animation. I'm going to finish that. And as I said, we need to turn on scaling for those images. So scale image flag here. Now when I resize the control, the image will scale to that size. And the same on the border. I want that to happen. And we have to hook it up, the animation up to something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just have a press event here. And I'm going to trigger that animation on the press event. Now it's called new animation. I'm going to have to rename it in a minute and you'll see why. But when I simulate, and I click on that animation, oops, that didn't work. Sorry. Oops. I'll put it on the application just for time's sake. You can see that I have an animation that has expanded and gone up. And I think it's a pretty cool animation. Now, I need to be fair. I mean, all you graphic designers out there, you're probably screaming like that is a horrible animation and you're the worst designer I've ever heard of. I will borrow two lines at this point, one from Pirates of the Caribbean, At Least You've Heard of Me. And the second one is that I am a software developer by heart. So you're lucky you didn't get fills with more fills. So when the actual card went up, you're lucky you didn't end up with fills. So basically what I'm gonna do now is that looked bad when it went up. Just to point out where it looked bad, you can see that the rounding on the corners got oblong. And that's because we're scaling an image, the whole image. What we can do is we can convert this to a 9-patch image. And when we convert it to a 9-patch image, what that's going to allow us to do is specify the areas that actually scale when the image scales up. So we have a convert to 9-patch function. And then it's going to convert those two images. I'm going to keep the originals around for now, just in case I ever need to go back to them. And we've now converted those 9-patch images. And if we go and look at the properties of that thing, we can now see that we switched over the image to actually be the 9-patch image. And now if we do that animate, and we have our application up, and if we run the demo now, we can see that the corners are nice now. So they actually have been rounded nicely. They're no longer oblong because we're only scaling certain parts of the image now, and so it's not trying to scale the whole thing to fit that whole size. So that's great. We've got this animation that's gone up, but we can't get it down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reverse this animation. First, I'm going to rename it to something that makes a little more sense. And I'm going to rename it to slide card up. And we need to do the reverse. So if we want to bring the card down, what we can do is we can now add in the reverse animation right off the fly. And it will take all the steps that are in that animation and do the inverse of them so that you end up with a way to get back to what you originally started with. And so if we take a look at it, it's modifying the same sort of things that this one is, but it's going back to its original state. So now that we can slide the card up and down, we need to hook that up. So I wrote some Lua code earlier, because one of the things that I personally dislike is when people type out code while doing a demo. So I'm not going to do that. I actually wrote the code earlier so that I didn't have to type that out and you didn't have to watch me hunt and peck for certain keys on the keyboard and scream incessantly about why can't he find the end key ever. So what I've done is I've set up a couple functions here. One is to invoke the animation, and one is to sort of track a state on the card. So if it's up or down, and then basically based on what it's going to do, I have to slide the card up or slide the card down. And so now I'm going to hook those up. So what we need to do is in here, instead of just triggering the animation, what we're going to do is we're going to invoke Lua code. And the Lua code that we're going to invoke is the CB invoke animation. So when I do the press now, it's going to invoke that Lua code. But we need to track the state. So when the animation is complete, I want to be able to tell my application whether or not the card is in an up state or a down state. So on the slide card up, I'm going to call some more Lua code, and that is going to set the state set is up. And when we slide the card back down, we're going to set the state to the other way. We're going to basically say, yeah, you're now down. So slide card down. And then if we simulate that, I can now move my card up and down. And again, I like this animation. If you're a graphical designer, maybe you don't, that's okay. We can agree to disagree. So that's a very quick, I've got my application into Designer and I've been using it, and I'm able to prototype an animation and see what that looks like and what that feels like. So that's great. So now we have to move along though, and we have to actually start to flush out this application a little bit more. And one of the things that I would like to show, I built up an application because again, I don't want you to have to watch me type through all this different stuff and set things up. But at this point, I'd like to point out one of our new features, which is the ability to support object-oriented Lua. Now, you saw before that I was specifying in the Lua code that I was actually specifying Lua functions. Well, if you want to track state on multiple objects, you probably want to encapsulate that into an actual object in Lua so that you can set the state individually on each of the things that you're working with. And so what we've done is we've allowed the ability to have a Lua function actually work with a Lua object. And so that's what you're seeing here on the presses. I've actually been able to invoke a function call outside of or inside of an actual Lua object. And if you look at my code, you can see I have a card Lua object, and inside of each of those objects, there's the functions that I need to actually track my state and make sure that everything is set up correctly when I'm interacting with my application. So if I simulate it now, yeah, so basically you have to select 2 cards now because this is a real game now, like it's on. So now basically I've got no match, and now I do have a match. Yay, look at me. So basically I've added in functionality to my application. I can track all of the states based on what's been selected through Lua, and I've been able to do that easily by implementing my Lua in an object-oriented fashion. And now I don't have to write a whole bunch of boilerplate code where I was calling a function before, and then I'd have to track where I was in the UI and then set up the state through that. I can remove that code, and it makes it slimmer and makes it easier to manage my Lua code so that I can build my application. That's the Lua object-oriented side of it. Now what I'd like to do is, actually, sorry, let me just reopen the application that I was dealing with there. Now what I'd like to do is show you the performance logging. So I'm going to reopen this application, and what we've done is through the IO connector, we've added the ability to basically send events to start, stop, and set the options on your performance logger as you're running. And those buttons are located up here in the IO connector. The IO connector is a tab that's in Designer. You'll find it on the right-hand side by default. And the IO connector is a way of sending GUI IO events to your running application from Designer. And so this feature's been around for a while, but what we've done in this release is we've enhanced it. So now that you're able to send sort of canned messages that you might not have had access to before, that you'd have to use IO gen or IO receive to sort of manage. And what we can do now is we can actually never leave Designer and able to start the performance log from there. So just before I start, I was doing some testing. I wanted to make sure that I got rid of the performance log so you can see. So I'm going to start this. And then over here, I have my options. And what you're going to see is I don't want to use the engine command line options. I may have specified some, but I don't want to use them in this case. I want to do my own thing. I want to specify that I'm going to put it to a special file because maybe I'm only testing one particular iteration of an animation or something, and I don't want it to be polluted with a whole bunch of other stuff that may have happened during startup. So I'm doing a very directed approach at what I want to actually look at. So I'm still running my animation or my application here, and I'm going to tell it to start the performance logging. And if we go to you can see that the memory performance log has been generated already. We've told it to turn on and start running. And now what I can do is I can start to go through and actually run my animations, see what I like and what I don't like. You know, I'll capture some things. Oh yeah, the dog's over here. Okay, great. So now we've matched. Now I'm going to stop it. And I can stop it. My application can continue to run, and I can start to look at what's going on in the performance log. And so when we pull this up, we have a graph, and this graph is actually going to show us our redraw times right off the hop. And you can see that we have some redraw times of 30 milliseconds in here. And what we've done is we have the ability to zoom in and out of the graph if you want, or reset it back to its original state. And we've also provided some pre-canned plot lines that you can select in here. For example, if you want to see the total resource load time for your application, you can set this and it will plot out when the resources are loading and the total time that you've spent loading those resources. So for example, if I want to add this in, I add it in here. And I didn't load anything within the concept of where I actually started and stopped my event, so it doesn't show up in this plot. But what I can do is, the other button I want to show you is the ability to show your animations as you go through. So I'm going to take the dog group B card back Y, which is, I was changing that Y value when it was going up and down. And I want to see what that looks like. And I can see here, these are when that animation run. And I can see that it's got a fairly linear up and down. So I think that animation is okay. And I can zoom in and actually see if I want to see more in detail what was going on, what was happening with the rendering at this particular point, and basically the values that are set. The other area where this would be nice is if you had competing animations, you could actually see what that value was being changed to. If you accidentally ran the animation twice and you get a stutter, you'll be able to see it in this graph that we have that issue going on. So that's how you sort of start and stop the performance log through IO Connector. And we've also covered the object-oriented Lua. So now I'm going to move on to the next canned application that I have for you. And in this one, what I've done is I've replaced the rounded rectangle 9-patch images with actual rounded rectangles. And you can see here that the render extension is a rectangle render extension. What we've done is we've added in a property, which is the corner radius on this. And this is on both rectangles and fills. So we will render a corner radius now so that we can round the corners. And what this will do is, and now I don't have to have that 9-patch image in my application anymore. And I don't have to draw that whole image every single time. I just want to show a highlight that's rounded around something else. And if I simulate this, you'll see that it behaves in much the same way as the other application. And now, if I want, I can take a performance log of this application, and we can see the difference between how optimized it is to use the rounded rectangles as opposed to the 9-patch images. So what I'll do is I'll start it up, and much the same way, I'll go to the IO connector. and through the IO connector, my start, stop, and options buttons. And again, this time I'm going to take a mem rounded rect plog. Same sort of deal as the original performance log that I took in the other application. I'm going to close a couple of these down just to make sure that I get the right channel. So there, we've started that up. I'm going to start up the performance log, and if we go and check, oh, sorry, this was on the wrong channel. I was doing the remote channel. That's coming. Just hold your horses. I will get to the remote channel. I was playing around with it earlier, so I'm going to stop that and start it again. I'm finishing strong here, so that's why the TCPI remote channel stuff is next. So basically, I've got this up and running now. I can now, check my options again, make sure they're okay, and pull the application up, and I can start it. And I can see that the log file is created, run through my options again, make some matches, prove how much memory I have in my head. Oh, whoops, did that a little too quick. There we go, we made a match, awesome. All right, I'm gonna stop it. And then I'm gonna pull up this log. And one of the things we can look at is it's not just the charts. This part was here before, but we can look at a screen and we can see the average redraw time that the screen was taking. So if I open up the other performance log that I had, we can see the average redraw time for the screen was 3 milliseconds. And by switching this out, we got a little bit faster. We're now down below 3 milliseconds. And if we look at the graph, we can see we've kind of smoothed out the graph. It does still have some spikes, but it's not as spiky as it was when we were doing some of those animations. And so if we wanted to compare sort of what the animations look like, I can add back in the Y animation for that card back, take a look at it there. And then on this side, I can do the same sort of thing. And we can see where they, whoops, that's the God mode dialog. I'll explain that in a minute. We can go here, add that in, and we can see sort of within that animation what the redraw times look like. And they look, here they're, a little high, but over here, if we look at it, they're a little bit better. So this one is 13 milliseconds at its peak, and this one was higher than that. So that one was at 29 milliseconds. So we've saved some rendering time by switching out how we're going to render those rounded rectangles. And now we can actually, render them with an actual render extension, and we don't have to go through the whole process of rendering an image to achieve the same sort of result that we want. So now I'm going to try something here. Hope everything's still okay. What I'd like to do is I'd like to show you sort of the remote connectivity. To do that, I'm going to see if I can actually start a video from a webcam that I've got set up. So I have a webcam pointed at a board, and this is, running a Linux OS, and I can talk to it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to deploy my application to the board. And so I'm going to do this through our SCP transfer interface. And I've set up my output address of where I need to put it to the board. I've got my user, password. I have where I want to put it on the board. And then after I execute the transfer, I'm actually going to run a script that's going to tell it to run this application. And so I'm going to run this, and we should see something pop up on the board in just a minute. Yeah, so we have our card app now running on the board, and now you'll see my finger come in there, and I can play around, and it's kind of reversed. So this is taking the memory game to a whole new level. So yeah, so it's on the screen, it's there. Now, let's say you were doing this for a thermostat, and you were putting on your thermostat, and before you go to bed every night, you like to play the memory game before you go to bed. And your boss comes up with the idea that, you know what, blue light before bed is bad. So we need to come up with a way of switching the theme at nighttime so that it uses less blue light. Because how many times have you been playing a memory game before you set the thermostat and you can't go to sleep after? So what I've done is I've generated an event to satisfy this need, and it's switch card theme. And what this event does is when I get it, I'm going to switch the theme to something that's a little bit more less blue light intensive, let's say. And I've got this orange card back here, image. And what I want to do is I want to switch that card back from the blue one to the orange one. Well, I want to see what it looks like on the target, because maybe, you know, on the target it's going to take a little bit longer to switch. Who knows? I just want to see what it looks like on the target. I'm not too worried about it in the simulator. I just want to see what it looks like on the target. Maybe the colors will be a little. So what I can do is I can connect to a remote channel, and I'm going to send that switch card theme event to the device. And through Storyboard IO over TCP/IP, I can send the event. And you can see, voila, our cards are now orange. And you're going to be able to sleep better, except I didn't switch the background, and that's still blue. So maybe I haven't fully met the feature request that was required of me. But as you can see, it's still a fully functioning app, and we can still play our game. And yeah, that's one of our major new features in Storyboard 6.2, which is this remote connectivity through TCP/IP, which means that you don't have to be tied to your application, to your hardware. It doesn't have to be you don't have to be connected to your computer directly. It can be somewhere else. And as long as you can see it, you can interact with it. The other nice thing about the remote communication is it allows you to work without having sort of your back end piece done. What if the card switch event was going to be generated by a back end piece that was going to check the time? And they're lagging a little bit behind because, you know, they have bigger fish to fry than switching the card theme. They have to make sure that you can't, you know, set the temperature of the house to 140 degrees. So they're worried about that. So they're working on that part of their back-end design. Well, this way you can test your UI by sending the events that you would receive from the back end and make sure that your side of it's okay, that the UI side performs and reacts the way it's supposed to when it gets the events that it's going to receive from the back end when the back end eventually is designed. So you're decoupling the back end development from the front end UI, and you can still simulate it, test it, and validate it on the hardware remotely through Storyboard IO over a TCP/IP connection. And so I think that pretty much wraps up my demo, Scott. So do I need to give you back the ability to sort of share?
Yeah, just before we do that, there was a couple of questions that you may want to kind of have your share. First one, kind of tangent to rounded rectangles was that. So with this rounded rectangle feature, the demo is showing how it is drawn, but I'm curious if you can actually take a PNG with hard corners and turn it into a rounded rectangle. In other words, does this setting actually modify the PNG?
No, so it does not modify the actual PNG. The PNG is untouched. What we've done, I'll go back to the application. The way we break up our rendering is we have what's called a render extension. So this render extension is an actual rectangle. So I had to switch it. So if I wanted to switch it back, for example, I would add in an image render extension. And then I get rid of this rectangle one. Now at this point, I'm going to be off the rails, so I'm not going to be able to, you know, probably go back to what we're doing. But I would add in the 9-patch PNG and tell it to scale it, and then that would add it in. So what the difference is there are two different render extensions under the control. So there isn't a switching automatically from the PNG to the rounded rect. You have to physically go in and add it as a new render extension and then round it out. But the original PNGs are there. And actually, sorry, this is actually a great question because it brought me to something that I wanted to show you. And I'm just going to delete this now.
Sorry, Rodney, we're just losing your audio. Okay, you're back.
I'm back. Sorry, guys. So this is actually an interesting point. So what I wanted to show you is the metrics view. And in the metrics view, what we're showing you is that resource cost that I was talking about for your images and your fonts and your model. And here you can see the memory. Now, in this case, my background image is taking up a lot of my memory, but I'm not too worried about it. I can handle that. But you can see now that I've got some images here that I'm not using that, you know, I could probably clean up and save on both the storage cost and the memory cost for those things. And so what I can do is, because I know I'm not going to use them again, I can do my resource cleanup. And what my resource cleanup will do, now I know my orange back card actually gets used, so I'm gonna put it over in the resources to keep. Otherwise, I can't have that switch happen, and I'm gonna get in trouble for my boss because I was supposed to have that that orange there because, you know, he can't sleep when he's looking at blue cards. So what I can do is then I can run the resource cleanup, and it's going to delete the file. So we give you a warning. We are going to delete files. So, you know, if you're not using a revision control system, now would be the time to start. And then it deletes those files. And then what you can see is we've updated the metrics view to show you what your new memory stats are for deploying to the board and using. And we can see that the 9 patch images and the original images have been removed. And so we've now managed to reduce our storage footprint and our memory footprint when we run our application on our target. So was there other questions, Scott? Sorry. That's my explanation.
Yep. So the next one, was the 9 patch feature present in 6.2? Is it similar to the 6.1 or previous versions?
The 9 patch images, it has been there for a while. Sorry, I should have highlighted that. That was a feature that's been around for a while. I believe it was actually put in during the 5.0 series. And then, yes, we've always had the ability to convert it and scale it and run those, run 9 patch images since we first put it in. All we're doing is enhancing the ability so that we can now provide an alternate way of getting the same sort of look and feel without having to use 9 patch images.
Perfect. And the other one was, is any chance we can see the Photoshop file, specifically how it was layered, that was done before importing the example in the demo?
Sure, I can show you this. And I'd like to say, again, I'm a software developer. I didn't make this Photoshop file. So a wonderful designer here at Crank Software made this Photoshop file for me. So I feel like I should give her props. Her name's Sarah. She did an awesome job on it. But yeah, that's not me because I am not a graphically inclined person at all. So I'm just going to move that out of the way. So here's the Photoshop file. Basically, when you structure a Photoshop file, we have sort of keywords that we pick up on when we're pulling in that Photoshop file, and we can actually generate storyboard elements based on the names that you're specifying in the Photoshop file. And so, for example, you saw I had a whole bunch of groups created, and that's because when Sarah organized this Photoshop file, she put in, I want these to be in groups because I want my cards to be sort of this idea of a UI element. So I'm going to put them in a group so they can be reused all over the place. And then underneath that, she basically just created regular layers, but we also have other naming conventions. For example, if you want something to go into a specific layer, if I want to create a new layer, I can name it _layer. We also have the ability to create buttons inside of the Photoshop file. So if you name something _up or _down, it will pick up on those things and it will say, oh, this is an up-down state, and we'll create the button for you when we pull that into Designer. So there's ways that you can structure your Photoshop file that make pulling it in and making it usable right off the hop even more efficient. So in this particular case, we were sort of highlighting other features of Storyboard, but those are things that we have documentation on and you can read about if you're so interested.
Perfect. And we have just one, actually we have a couple more questions that came in. Is there any improvement of reusable components in 6.2?
There was a little bit of improvement on 6.2, but we are looking to extend it even further. Some component work was done just to make sure that we are picking up when you're using a component, switch components and things along those sides. Mostly bug features, bug fixes on the component side. Not a whole lot of feature development there. But if you have ideas and things, contact support and let us know, and we can work towards maybe including those in the next in a future release.
Perfect. Can this naming convention work when importing sketch files? So the one you were just talking about with Photoshop.
Sketch works a little bit differently. The naming convention for the most part should work, but there's an intermediate step that's going on there. We're exporting to a GAP file and then we're importing the GAP file into Designer. So for the most part, yes, that whole naming convention should work as we go through, but Sketch is a little bit different than Photoshop. So there might be some small inconsistencies between what would happen if you were importing a Photoshop file as opposed to pulling in a Sketch file.
Perfect. And the other one's about sending access to the slides, which are shown in the presentation. So perfect. All right.
You're gonna have
with that being said, Rodney, so if you want to kind of pass them back controls. Perfect. Everybody should be seeing my screen right now. So just to kind of wrap things up, definitely want to kind of key on some of the key features within Storyboard that actually some of them I talked about, some of them Rodney talked about. Definitely when it comes to, you know, really kind of starting early and accelerating development of the UI, it all can begin within user-friendly or designer-friendly tools such as Photoshop or Sketch, where those design files can be directly imported into the tool or easily updated using a Photoshop re-import. Like Rodney said, the thing with Sketch is a little bit more of a closed environment, doesn't give us the hooks that we have with Photoshop, but it is something we're always looking to expand upon, and even maybe bring in different design tools as they kind of become a little bit more popular. Definitely the two most popular ones right now are Photoshop and Sketch from a designer standpoint. Also, when you kind of bring that in, like I talked about, that compare and merge tool. So something that is very unique to Storyboard that allows you as a developer or designer to really kind of remain in control and selecting which design changes you want to apply to it. Also, again, within the actual Storyboard application, you have that kind of animation timeline capabilities, which allows you to add, you know, movement, flow, add behavior, of course, via Lewis scripting that really kind of brings that UI to life. And then last but not least, you know, you got all those testing and validation capabilities. So whether it's running a simulation, like you saw Rodney do several times, so whether it's doing it directly on the PC, maybe it's doing the export into maybe something like an Android, so you can put it onto a mobile device, so you can, or a tablet, so you can kind of take it to a group to do some kind of usability testing. And of course, you know, put it right directly onto the physical embedded hardware that you would be using. All of this allows for you really to kind of get a feel for how is the UI going to perform. You know, whether it's that high level as to, you know, the buttons, the animations, the ability to see the text, can I read the text, do I like where the buttons are located, maybe from just a generic kind of on my PC, all the way to, is the performance of the UI gonna work the way it's intended to on that physical device. And then of course, even taking it to the next level, like Rodney talked about with specifically 6.2 enhancements that we've done that really allow for that validation, that testing process to occur remotely. So definitely if you take a look at, again, like something that we're all experiencing right now is that many of us have been asked to work from home. So we're in this remote working environment. And so definitely the timeliness of 6.2 it really allows for your projects that you're working on to continue. Allowing whether it's the beginning phases of it, so the UI can be perfected without actually physically having the physical hardware. Being able to kind of test and validate it without actually being, you know, necessarily beside each other. So really allowing for that remote capabilities to still collaborate and really kind of build the UI that's for your project. So that way, you know, when, you know, everything kind of, you know, hopefully goes back to normal sooner rather than later, it really allows that project not to be greatly impacted too much. It all depends on, you know, hardware components, whether you can get it and stuff like that. But at least from the UI standpoint, you can continue to go on as business as usual and really kind of build out that UI. So that way the project can be continued on as well. So, you know, some of the key takeaways before we kind of wrap things up and jump into maybe some of the final questions that maybe came in is that definitely, you know, hopefully the things that Rodney talked to you about today really makes it, you know, paints the picture of how we are helping make UI development a lot easier. Definitely, there has been that big emphasis. We're always looking to really improve you know, the UI design development process. But when this one, you know, it's really about making some better choices that when it comes to the UI that really help enhance the user experience. So whether it's the testing and validation, whether it's from capturing those performance logs, and more importantly, having that visual indication as to we can see, like Rodney showed, the spikes that were going on, that, okay, what is causing that, and being able to drill down and see, you know, whether it's a resource or did you have multiple items that were kind of going on. And even the bonus one that Rodney showed of showing you how much kind of maybe memory is being mapped to items that the UI no longer needs, but we're kind of still there because of different iterations that occurred. So definitely there's a lot of different capabilities baked into Storyboard that really allow you to kind of emphasize on improving the user experience. Because like I said at the top of the hour, is that when it comes down to it, because consumers are driven by the expectations of their mobile device experience, that it really plays a large part in if you're building for the consumer market, or even if you're building for maybe the industrial and medical market, definitely usability is really key. So, you know, if this is the first time you've come here and, you know, you want to evaluate Storyboard, we definitely have a free trial. It's a full-featured version of Storyboard that you can, allowing you to download, get access to some of the project files, demo images, so that way you can kind of learn, is this going to help me out with my project? But most importantly, through those demo images as well, allowing you to evaluate the graphical performance of the particular hardware that you may be evaluating right now. So definitely check it out. Our free trial, you can go to cranksoftware.com and you'll see it in the upper right-hand corner, the link to the free trial, as well as we have a wealth of information within our help center, our support center. So again, going to cranksoftware.com in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see support. That'll take you to our help center where we have knowledge-based articles. We have a series of videos for getting started to really kind of walk you through the different steps associated with building a UI, from all the way from downloading Storyboard, from importing files from Photoshop, to adding animations, maybe re-importing, validation, testing, Lewis scripting, all that good stuff. That really allowing you to kind of understand from A to Z how to kind of build a UI within Storyboard. So with that being said, like I said, I just want to, we'll jump into some Q&A in a moment, but I just want to kind of, thank you all for definitely taking time out of your busy day to come in and listen to both Rodney and I talk about all the great enhancements that were being introduced within 6.2. So I'm just kind of skimming through. We have one last question that came in. Does the comparator have command line functionality to enable it to be integrated as a difference tool within version control software? Rodney, I'm going to look to you for that one.
Yeah, it does. We have a command line version that you can run so that it can hook into your revisioning control system, so that it can do the updates and the merges, and as long as there's no conflicts, it will work. It will work just like you would for anything else. And if there's a conflict, then you have to address it before it will do the merge, and it will warn you of that. Yep. The short answer is yes, we do have a command line tool.
Perfect. Thank you, Rodney. So just giving you guys a couple of more seconds, minutes, just to maybe pose any other questions you want. Thank you for those that stuck around. I know we went a little bit over today. Well, one thing I didn't mention at the top, this is actually being recorded, so that way you can easily come back at any point in time if there's something you missed, or maybe something you kind of wanted to review again. It will be posted within our webinar section within our web pages. So that being said, I'm not seeing anything else coming in. Thank you once again for taking time out of your busy day. Stay safe. All the best to you and your family during this challenging period and interesting times. But don't forget that if you haven't done it before, go check out Storyboard, get that free 30-day evaluation, full-featured evaluation, and all the best. We'll talk to you soon.